Welcome to the Board of Selectmen's meeting. It's August 5, for those of you not watching live. And we announce at the beginning of every meeting that the meeting is being recorded, just so you're forewarned. So when you end up on the internet, you know that it happens. And we always start at the beginning now to take a moment of appreciation for our servicemen and women serving in Afghanistan. Thank you. We're starting this evening with Ed Hinckley, tree warden. Hi, Ed. Thank you for coming. Update on Medfield's tree inventory, it says. Mr. Weiler to give update of Tree City. George Darrell discuss invasive weeds. Superintendent Feeney discuss roads and sidewalk construction. So who's starting? Trees first, Ed?
Well, he's got seniority.
Okay, all right. Longevity?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Ed Hinckley, Town Tree Warden. Before we get going, I will let you know that the tree warden is part-time. I don't have any employees. My employees come from either Public Works or the Water Department on certain days. That's about what I got to say.
I just had a couple of things. First of all, not to embarrass you, but to take you out of the tree warden just for a second and put you back as the superintendent of the water. I just want to congratulate you and thank you for years and years of service that you've given to the town of Medfield in that capacity. And I hope that that vast knowledge that you have of our water system someone will be able to tap into that, because you have just an incredible knowledge and background of the whole water system here in the town of Medfield. How many years were you with the
Almost 50.
Wow. So that's
49 3/4. Yeah. And
just
I'll probably be retiring at the end of this month.
just to thank you for that. I'm kind of a research geek in the sense I actually went through starting back in all the town reports, starting back in 1914 of all the tree warden reports. But it was interesting. The reason I bring this up, back in 1914, the tree warden was this George L.L. Allen,
Right.
which I think was probably Ellis Allen's grandfather.
Yes, it was. Yes.
But he started a yearly tree program that lasted up until about 1982, and then unfortunately, with Proposition 2.5, the Warrant Committee felt, unfortunately, that was one of the things that meant the axe, no pun intended,
Right.
to the tree planting program. But it's amazing that what they planted back then, we're enjoying now. You know, a lot of these trees
Right.
on the different streets that are now, over the years, 70, 80, 90, 100 years old, we get the benefit. And I think that's a big plus with Medfield, is the amount of trees that we have. I'd like to see if we could bring that program back, and I'm not sure, I know you're tied right now because of whatever funds you have, of the
Right,
amount of
yes.
trees. But whether we could bring that program back again. I'll just give you, in 1914, for example, 274 shade trees, mostly Norway maples, some red oaks were planted.
Norway maples are now considered an invasive species.
Oh, probably. But in 1921, we had this major ice storm that was tremendous tree damage, but Alan said at the time, we are indebted to our forefathers, the beautiful trees. Let us leave well-shaded trees for future generation, which we're getting now. 1924, 26 shade trees, 25, 28 shade trees, 26, 40 shade trees. I mean, on and on each year. 1958, 58 trees. We get hit by that whole Dutch elm disease
Right,
that
yeah.
devastated all the elms in the 50s and early 60s. But they pretty much kept up. 58 trees were destroyed, 51 planted in 58. 1960, 51 trees died of the elm disease, 70 were planted. 1964, 28 trees planted. Following year, 86 trees planted. I'm just wondering if we can get back, and I think we can make a state before the Warrant Committee of an argument to kind of bring back this tree planting program. And I'd like to see with this new meals tax that's coming in, especially trees that go in the downtown area, that maybe we can use some of that as an argument because it's going to make the businesses look better. And I know Gus Murby, the Warrant Committee, that was one of the arguments he used at the floor of town meeting to support the, the meals tax. We did have, on that aesthetics and sidewalk committee, we had a young person, I think he was just out of high school, that did an actual tree inventory of the downtown area. So we do have an inventory of what trees we have in the downtown area.
I believe that was, who did that survey? Was Luda Tree? His boy did that survey?
No, it was Andrew Bond.
That's it, Andrew Bond.
Andrew Bond.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he was working with Mike Leaders last summer.
So we do have, at least in the downtown area, I think he did a pretty good job.
He actually surveyed the locations
Sarah,
of the trees.
can you just use the
Want me to use the
microphone?
microphone?
Otherwise,
Sure.
people at home can't hear you.
So it was Andrew Bond that did the tree inventory last summer. He did a GPS survey of the locations of trees, but it would need to be fleshed out with species and diameters and calipers and things like that. But it's a
And another thing I'd like to bring up, subdivision rules. They are now planting trees by the zoning board and new development and stuff like that. We're making them plant trees along the roads.
And some of them I know, like Adam Street, for example, which used to have a lot of trees over the years, that, especially that section from like Cottage to Dale Street has
Right.
lost a lot of those trees. And then with the new Green Street project, I don't know if does the state pay for, is the Green Street project, any of that state funded?
Yeah, we plan on, yes, we do. The Green Street project's pretty,
Turn it on.
we're not planning on taking much down on the Green Street project. I think it's pretty much where it is. Property is kind of limited there. So there may be a couple of trees, some of them that are older and stressed, that may have to come down. And Eddie keeps an eye on them. Yeah, I don't see any major tree clearing.
Would there be any money for planting of new ones in there?
It's pretty tight. If people want them on their private property, fine. That's what we do in the subdivisions now, and this is because of Eddie and his work. That tree list that you see at the subdivisions, that's Eddie's tree list. There's very survivable, good trees, reliable, and they're back on private property now because too close to the roads, salt, on the winter, and they become pretty stressed. So Eddie made arrangements with the planning board and now the developers put the trees back with a proper setback so that they're high survivability. That's what Eddie's been doing.
Does that become a town tree if it's on private property?
No, we usually get permission to put them back there, or if the contractor will put them in before he sells the houses. So they're already in there.
So that would be a private tree, not a town tree?
Yes.
Okay.
And there's a lot of questions on private trees and town trees. People think just because a tree hangs over the road, it's a town tree, but it's really not. If it's behind the property line, it's a private tree.
Right,
And I have a lot of questions on that quite often on that.
right.
There is another issue, a couple of issues with the older streets in town because of the narrowness of them. There are laws that have been passed now that require that we do certain things. For example, American with Disabilities Act, what is it, Ken, 42 inches width on minimum clearance?
What they do now is they design roads from the outside in, and whatever's left over, that's what the cars get.
Yeah.
So you get your bike paths. North Street right now is under design, and sidewalks, I believe, are 5 feet. That includes for a telephone pole, you have to be able to get to 48 inches for wheelchairs. And actually, I think they're at a point now where 2 wheelchairs have to be able to pass at a telephone obstruction, so it kind of gets a little bit tough there. So they start out with the wheelchairs, they start out with the wheelchair ramps on the outside, and they go out to the bicycle path on either side, which I believe those are, I think 3 or 4 foot.
Minimum 4 feet on
Yeah.
each side.
Then they go.
They prefer 8,
then they
but,
come in.
yeah.
So North Street right now is down to 2 11-foot traffic lights. That's the way it's going to be designed.
Because you have to give in, it has to come somewhere with the bike lanes and the sidewalks and everything.
Up somewhere, yeah.
So would there be any room, you don't like to plant inside the sidewalk, which makes sense because it's going to dig them up. You want to put it outside. Any tree planting, correct me if I'm wrong, you want to be outside the sidewalk, correct?
Yeah, we would prefer that, and the reason being is, once they become a nice tree, sizable tree, the sidewalks lifted up. And, trip and fall hazards, things like that. And so, then at that point, you've got to make a decision, you're gonna take the tree down, you're gonna cut the roots, and the tree's gonna get stressed. So, yeah, you'd like to set them back.
So would there be any plans for North Street with tree planting or anything, is that?
You can do anything you want. We have a 25% hearing. We meet with every single person along that way. And there's nothing wrong with planting a tree back on the private property that, will become a shade tree in the future. That's not a big deal at all.
So you have to get permission from the local,
Yeah,
Yeah.
the homeowner.
Homeowner.
The
Yeah.
who wants a tree. It's that kind of thing. But on North Street, I don't think there's that many trees coming down either. I think most of the trees were stressed out. And so, but when you do something like that, and you're coming along, and maybe you make it a little bit wider in front of somebody else's property, or in some cases along this North Street project, it's going further away from other houses, you create a green area. And we tried to do that at the intersection of Pine Street. We tried to make a big round-out area where we'll have a green area and put some trees in there. So, and eliminate the island, which we understand the island is named after a World War II veteran, and which will just move it out to the roundabout.
Yeah.
And you'll have a much better pedestrian
Yeah.
crossing at Pine Street, and more of a controlled intersection.
I just think now that we're a tree city as well, it might be nice we could get, maybe partnership with private people, with businesses, Memo and others that would help with funding and things. Because I just think that the trees in the downtown just add to that kind of character that, that is Medfield. And I realize you have to be,
Right.
you have to be careful so you're not lifting up roots of, getting into the sidewalk and things like such as that.
I think we met with NSTAR today, Richard, and they did offer us some trees. That was pretty good. They have a planting program. So we should take advantage of that.
But I'm wondering if
Their
we,
properties.
if we can get,
No, they will put them, they'd rather vegetate around town where we want them.
Oh,
Not
anywhere.
Not on their easements.
Oh, okay, all right. All right, good.
like a tree planting program back again that we can take and support you at the warrant committee and a town meeting. I think the citizens of Medfield would support that.
Yeah, and now you got to remember, my budget is usually the first one cut
Yeah.
at
But
town meeting.
I'd like to support that though, and so that it doesn't necessarily just get chopped
Right.
automatically.
There is one other thing you need to keep in mind too, as a member of the Energy Committee. You have to make sure when you want to plant a tree in front of someone's house that they don't have any plans to put solar panels on the roof,
Right,
because sometimes that can interfere with the
right,
operation of solar
right.
panels.
If it's south facing, sure.
Yeah, so you need to check that out with the abutter so you don't.
But I'd just like to just encourage you, if we can get back, because I think the trees that they planted back, in the past 100 years, we're enjoying now, and I'd like to see our kids and grandkids have the same nice character here in Medfield as well. I don't know, Mr.
The
Chairman.
trouble is, years ago, they planted all the nice elms, and they came all over the streets, beautiful, but the elms are all gone now, and
They say now not to plant all of one kind. You gotta divide it up so that if you get something like that
Right.
happens again,
yeah.
it doesn't wipe you out.
Eddie, are there any American elms or American chestnuts left in town at all?
Is there any more?
Elms or American chestnuts that are left in town at all?
Yes, there is. There's a nice one down there on Curve Street,
An elm?
a nice elm, yeah, and chestnut, we still got some up on corner of Ferry Street. And there's still one on South Street Extension.
Oh, good.
Can I just ask one other? We have an Eagle Scout that's is working on a project at the town pound.
Yeah,
on High Street, and of course, in the town pound is perhaps the oldest tree in Medfield, certainly one of the ancient trees,
that's
but
it.
it's not looking very good.
No,
Is,
it's getting towards the end of its life, really. That's been around a long time. I had to take a big leader out of that tree because it was hanging out over the street and it was a danger to the public way. And I hated to take it down, but it was all dead and I had to take it.
what do you think the future of that is? Is that something we're gonna have to look at to take down, or?
Probably will have to look at it, yeah.
I thought if we might be able to get a seedling or an acorn or something from that tree and start a new one, that at least it would come, it would
From the
be a
same tree.
descendant of the tree. So, maybe if we could get one of the nurseries or something to see if they could get a tree like that going, it'd be a nice continuity in the site. The other thing too is you got to give Ed and Ken some credit, and I know this was initially your project, but the highway department planted 350 trees for the 350th anniversary, and I
Right.
think most of those trees, the vast majority of them, took because they went around and watered them,
Yeah.
and they were planted appropriately, and they were put in parks and whatever. So we did add a lot of trees.
Yeah, I mean, they look nice, especially Metacomet, the high school area. And the highway did a great job. I think a lot of that was, we got private funds for it, but the highway did the bulk of the planting.
Yeah. Okay.
I think there's an opportunity to do that sort of thing going forward. I think that we could have a private, public partnership. I think that we should, as a town, we should come up with a plan to encourage people, and the plantings of the trees would go onto their properties, that we would have our list that apparently are recommended plantings for the downtown area. And I think it'd be fairly simple to have not too many guidelines, and then encourage people to plant a tree in their front yard.
How would you set that up?
I would think that the town would just draft some very simple guidelines, and then we would publicize it and try to encourage.
Is that something, Ed, you can think about, maybe over the next, maybe a plan of the next couple of years, where you would plant trees, with some, come in with a budget of a tree planting program,
We're gonna look into it, yeah.
that we could support, and then maybe, as Pete said, maybe some kind of a program that we could encourage private businesses, private people, to make it simple, how they could, like, check off or something to
Yeah.
say that they'd be willing to pay for the planting of a tree.
All right.
I think that'd be a great idea. And there's certain trees, I know the trees along North Street, I asked you what type they were once a year or so ago, and you told me they were the wrong type.
Yeah. Lindens, those are lindens there, yeah.
Yeah,
They're an awful dirty tree, those lindens, you know? They
yeah.
bush out and,
Sort of like the ones that were out in front of Brothers Marketplace there. They're kind of
no, those are locusts.
locusts, yeah.
Those are honey locusts, yeah.
The lindens have a nice flower and a nice fragrance at a certain time of the year, but a lot of them are
They
a nice
did, yeah.
shape too, but they're probably not a good street tree.
What's the latest with the ones in front of the Montrose School on North Street?
Those are lindens, those small ones, yeah.
I think,
We were gonna take those out because they're lifting the sidewalk up. We had a hearing on the trees and everything. And
Was-
then we never get to take them
was
down.
Montrose in agreement to have trees planted along their property?
On their, we talked to them about it, yeah.
Yes, it'd be nice if those trees came down, it'd be nice if we could
Put
replace
them back
them.
behind, put them back on private property, yeah,
I mean, they have a
Right.
fairly open area there.
yeah. But they may want that open area with all the kids there and everything else too, you know? We'd have to talk to them about that.
Yeah, because one or two of those trees really are lifting the sidewalk. back.
Yeah.
Well, a couple of, one's closer to James Avenue, two of them look like they're almost dead. There's one healthy one, but that's the one that's
Yeah,
really lifting the
right.
sidewalk.
Yeah.
So is that something you're gonna be in touch with Montrose to see if they would allow that? Was that,
Yeah, we have to talk to them, yeah.
okay.
Okay?
Yeah, thank you.
So Ed, before you leave, I just want to say thank you for all of your almost 50 years of service, 5 decades. That's hugely impressive. I know that when I met you was when you took us, a selectman, around to perambulate the
Yeah.
bounds of the town, and I was so impressed because, well, first I discovered that I actually, when they told me I had to perambulate the bounds, I thought that meant walk. I thought I was going to walk around the whole town.
They used to.
But then I got to actually drive with you, and I was so impressed that you knew where these granite markers were in the woods, that,
Well, I've been doing it for quite a few years, you know?
yeah, oh, yeah. Well, that's the sort of, it's not just the trees that you
Yeah.
have this institutional knowledge of about this town. It's a huge amount of knowledge that you obviously have around, about the town, and so I thank you for
Okay,
everything
thank
you've
you.
done for the town.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks
you.
for coming. And Christine?
Actually, I'm gonna ask to hold to discuss that you have a posted public hearing for 7:20, so you need to take that.
Okay, very good. We'll switch gears. Public hearing then on solicitation application, Anthony Cittalaria, manager, Dooley Disposal Services, Inc. Yes. Yeah, if you could, then, because that has the microphone. Otherwise, the people at home can't hear you unless
Really
you're
good.
near a
Thanks.
microphone.
Thanks for having us. Good evening. I'm Anthony Spitaler. That's AJ Dooley. The company is Dooley Disposal Services. We're a fourth-generation trash company out of Foxborough. And well, really, I think a good starting point is to ask what specific questions you folks have. We've done a number of canvassing permits in other towns and have never been asked to have a public meeting. So
Oh, well,
we're
why don't you
kind
just
of
give us a rundown as to what you're planning on doing, what you're hoping to do.
Yeah, really good. So what we do is we do residential curbside trash and recycling pickup. And what's different about us is we do single stream recycling. So it's different from dual stream in that you don't separate the papers from the rest of the recyclables. You commingle them together. And really, we're here, based on a need. The phone's been ringing over the last couple months, and we've had customers in Medfield call and say, "Hey, we want weekly recycling, and so is picking us up, and it's bi-weekly, it's not weekly," and that's a service we provide. So with your blessing, that's what we're looking to do, is to bring some education about single stream recycling and curbside trash pickup, and in an affordable service to Medfield.
So you're looking to do door-to-door solicitation?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. When are you planning on doing it?
We had hoped to do it this summer. Here we are in August, so the hope would be that we would be able to start in August and September, and then maybe have a month in June. Usually we do this for 3 months for a solid summer, but by the time we got underway here, it would be close to the end of August. So preferably August, September, and then June of next year.
Mike or Evelyn, what is our usual rule on terms of how long we allow this?
It varies. Yeah, you've done it for a couple of, usually you try to restrict it to 2 weeks, but a lot of them have, like when they do the textbook soliciting, you've extended it beyond the 2-week period, so
Yeah, all right,
it's really
but not 3
discretionary.
months usually.
The one thing you like to do is to restrict it to daylight hours.
Yeah,
And I believe you have to specify the time. It isn't enough to say sunset. You have to say 7 p.m. or 7:30 p.m., whatever.
happen to know that sunset the other day was
8 p.m. last night.
just
I
shy
happened to see
of
it on
8.
the news.
It was just short of 8.
And
What time did you plan to start?
Typically we start at about 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and we will knock all the way through 8, 9 o'clock at night. When people get home from work, 6 o'clock, that's when, what we call prime time is. They're really receptive. They want to talk after work. So clearly, we'd have to be done here by dusk. So in between the hours of, say, 11 and 7 then, or dusk.
Well, I
fine.
think you have to be more specific. So 11 to 7, is that okay?
Yeah, well,
Okay.
I'm trying to kind of curtail to whatever you guys have on the docs as regs. I mean, we're in Norton. We have a solicitor's permit in Norton right now that's a year long, and it has no specifications as times. We knock Monday through Saturday from about 10 in the morning till about 8 or 9 o'clock at night. So however you'll have us, whatever the parameters are, we're okay with. We'll
So
work
if we
around
did
that.
11 to 7, and then what days of the week?
It's typically Monday through Saturday.
just a suggestion, you might want to send out a mailer before you go door to door so that people will know. Sometimes a stranger comes up to the door and people are afraid, they don't know what it's about. And I think if you send out a mailer saying you're going to be soliciting in the neighborhood before you go out, it might ease people's concerns.
It's a really, really good advice, great point. We've done it in the past, and it is really helpful for the homeowners.
Do we have to have the chief check this also?
He'll check out anyone who's, you'll have to submit a list of who's going to solicit for you to the police department.
I
and
think
they review
I've
the
done that already. Yeah,
people, and he's okay with them.
I'd have to update that list now because some of my summer guys are going to be gone now because of the end of summer, so,
Yeah.
but we can do that.
If you can get that to Evelyn, then. Could I ask where you take your trash and recyclables?
Yeah, several different facilities. Recyclables primarily go out to a company called E.L. Harvey in Westboro. So it's a single stream recycling plant. And the trash primarily goes to a place in Dedham called Recycling Solutions, is where they handle the municipal solid waste that gets collected.
Are you
Is-
guys at all, I know there's a new law for hotels and restaurants. In fact, they just put a unit in across the street at this Brothers Marketplace to, what do they call it?
Organic food waste ban.
Recycling.
Yeah, so I'm really familiar with the waste bans, and the newest one in Massachusetts is the organic waste ban. And that really is tailored towards big commercial facilities. They have to generate so much.
Now it is. That's how it starts.
That's how it starts. So much food waste. I mean, the hope is that, we hit fast forward 10, 15 years down the line, this stuff is happening with the homeowners and small businesses. But no, we're not really involved in that. That doesn't happen on the residential level, and we don't handle big hospitals and big schools where that waste ban would be applicable.
I've been here long enough. We used to do it.
Yeah.
The homeowners, but we called it garbage collection.
Yeah.
Now it's called organic waste recycle, food waste recycling. So goes around, comes around, I guess. So
And just your hours, if you do come into Medfield, your hours of when you're actually in town in the morning, you're not here before 7, are you?
No, we never start before 7. And so a good starting point would be 7 o'clock and, through the end of the route. And that would be determined, upon the customer base. We do have small market share here in Medfield now, very small, but we hope that route would grow, but it would never be beyond, late to mid-afternoon.
So I guess I would suggest that instead of the 3 months, since we typically don't do that much, could we sort of strike a compromise with 2 weeks in each month?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
You guys pick the weeks that you want.
Sure.
And then let them do it 11 to 7, Monday through Saturday. I'll make that a motion then.
I guess it's my job to make the motion there. You're the chair,
Well,
but
I
I'll
just
so
made it,
moved.
Yeah, I'll second it then. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Yep. All right, so you're all set then for and if you can coordinate your, the 2 weeks that you're gonna pick in each of those 3 months with Evelyn, please.
Really good. So, is that something we do this week, or should I tonight, or do I call you this week? And okay, really good.
Thanks for putting us on your list of places that you're gonna serve.
Yeah,
Good
thanks
luck.
for having us. Appreciate it.
Okay, now back to Tree City update.
I should have a date for you at your next meeting. I am working directly with Roach Brothers, Brothers Market they'd like to work with us on the proclamation and the dedication for Arbor Day. Since we're going to use their sidewalk and their trees as part of our dedication, they'd like to be part of it. So they've been a little busy this week. We haven't been able to talk about it. So once it slows down a little bit next week, I will be working with their management and their public relations staff to set up an actual date, and then we can publicize it.
Okay, great.
So hopefully by your next meeting, I'll have that date, and we're looking at sometime mid-September.
Great.
Speaking of Roach Brothers, my question was that, because I remember from the plans that they were gonna have a living wall at the backside, and I don't see that, and so I keep
They're
wondering.
having a problem with the living wall because of where the utilities needed to be located on the back of the building.
I've wondered.
But
Wow.
they are still working on getting something there. It just won't be to the extent of which we had seen some renderings of.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Next, we have George Darrell discuss invasive weed.
Samples, I was like samples.
Oh my goodness, they're invading our.
Thank you for having me. I'm George Darrell, 25 Curve Street in Medfield. I'm here with Christine McHugh of 7 Curve Street, Medfield. And together, we have, if you'll excuse me 1 minute. Sorry. I don't want to miss anything here.
Thank you.
So, the reason we're here is to describe our grassroots effort to raise awareness on little things that people can do to stem the tide of invasive plants, which we see coming on much stronger than usual. We see, I'm sure everybody's seen what looks like a lot more poison ivy, Virginia creeper, which is that 5-leaved vine that's all over everything. But there are some real nasty plants out there that we're seeing more of. I've been studying invasive plants for about 2 years. I got a certificate from UMass Extension in invasive plant management, and I'm currently enrolled in a program of invasive species management with Dr. Westbrooks in Whiteville, North Carolina. And what we're seeing all over is a kind of a creeping northward of plants that were once in the south. For instance, black locust, we see it all. We've had black locust for quite a while, but it's really a southern tree, and it is considered somewhat invasive. I don't know where to start because you guys have really got into the tree business here. I didn't know this meeting was going to be so focused on trees, but I just want to just comment on one of the comments that we did in the Centennial plant a lot of trees. A lot of them were Norway maples, which the state of Massachusetts now is prohibited. You cannot buy them anymore. It's kind of a blessing and not a blessing because these trees are very sturdy. For they don't get disease, they don't get bugs, and so forth. The bad part about them is that they shade out just about everything else, and they multiply prolifically. So when they get into the woods, they shade out all the native trees as well as the understory. So it is a problem, and I heard Ed mentioning that linden's a dirty tree, and I'm thinking, gosh, what's left? What are you going to use for a city tree? Put ailanthus up, or and that's probably the worst guy we'd like to see. So basically, we're here. Chris said, let's get a little awareness of these invasive plants, just what they are and what maybe homeowners can do to kind of stem the tide. And what Chris brought in is this is an example of black swallowwort. Now, this plant's been around Medfield for a long time, and I think probably long before I came 20 years ago. And it was described to me as morning glory or various other names. But in fact, it's an invasive plant, and anybody who has it in their yard knows how hard it is to get rid of. You can pull it up forever, and it's hard to get rid of. But when it's at this stage, as Chris pointed out, you just take these pods off and probably throw them in your trash, not in your compost, because these are like milkweed pods, and as they ripen, you've probably seen them, they're going to spray out all those seeds, and there's like hundreds of thousands of seeds from one plant. It's definitely over 1,000. I'm not sure what the count is on these, but you get a bunch of these plants. So just stemming the tide, you can do that just by pulling the pods off and throwing them in the trash, or cutting them down and throwing them away. So Chris immediately jumped on this and has, the next thing I knew, I was in the paper and then online and everything, and She must have got to you guys because you guys were amazing. I cannot believe the change in this area, because this area right here has black swallowwort, it's got bittersweet, it's got everything, but now, not now. Beautiful job. Thanks so much.
Is that right? What happened? How did it disappear?
Somebody, Park and Rec was out there when
Right.
earlier today.
DPW was going to do the bridge on Curve Street. Yep.
Well, it's a great job, great
Great.
job. Did the library, did this whole area here, and that black swallowwort was all over that chain link fence. It looks gorgeous. So, but that all we wanted to do was get out some flyers to help homeowners be aware of the problem and see what they can do, you know, just a kind of a resident-friendly fact sheet we can put out, we might have a community info session where we'd have, you know, a little workshop and just talk about invasives, because there's a few real nasty ones, maybe 3 or 4 right now in Medfield that are pretty nasty, and one of them can't really be taken out by ordinary means and should probably be handled like a hazardous substance. So you've got
George, is there a place like online or something that someone can go if they want to find out more information? What's the best avenue, the best place someone can go to find information out?
right now we've got an email address, which is medfieldinvasiveplants@gmail.com.
So if anybody has any questions, they can email Medfield Invasive
They can email, and
Plants
we'll get we'll try to respond back to them.
Okay.
You might want to consider doing a show on cable. Usually it's probably
Medfield
enough people
TV.
watch that, and it does get good coverage.
Yeah, please.
Chris McHugh Potts on Curb Street. I just wanted to mention that, I didn't know much about any of these plants until I started having some work done at my house. And one of the landscape guys said, this stuff is really bad. It was the black swallowwort. And then I started talking to George, and he was telling me about this Japanese knotweed. And one of the things that's very scary about this Japanese knotweed is that it breaks through concrete, it breaks through asphalt, and there's a lot of it around the Historical Society right now. And if that gets into some of our brand new buildings, it's all along Route 27. We have this beautiful DPW building, right, that's being built. And that particular weed can do a lot of monetary damage to the buildings that we have. And it's popping up all over town. And so that's one that George really, educated me on. I knew nothing about it. And now I see it in very dangerous areas around town. And it's something that, I said to George, we have so much conservation land here in Medfield. And it's like, you feel like sometimes it's a drop in the bucket, like you really can't make an impact. But what we're trying to do is focus in on the most critical areas and make it easy for people that if you see this in your yard, you see that black swallowwort, the best thing you can do short term is to cut it. If you can get those seed pods out, that's the best thing to do. We are not going to be able to tackle every single piece of Japanese knotweed in town. But if we can look at Kingsbury Pond, where it's starting to invade where the mill area is, where they did all that work, that would be an area that might be a good place to focus in on. If we can get all the grounds crew in town, when they're out mowing anyway and they see some of these seed pods, they can take an extra minute, extra 5 minutes and just cut that stuff off as they go along. There are things that they can just be built in the regular maintenance that shouldn't be a big deal, especially with that, the black swallowwort. But I think that, it's going to be important for everybody to start looking at, what buildings that we have in Medfield. It might be at risk, especially historical buildings. I'm sure there's some invasive stuff behind the Clark Tavern. And it's just everybody sort of keeping their eyes out and saying, hey, this one historic building or this town building is at risk, and we really have to deal with this. Historical Society, you can see it all around the base, and that stuff will go right through the foundation. And
Is that Japanese knotweed also, is that called Japanese bamboo at times?
is it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
So that's why we're not really focusing on every single invasive species in every place around town because there's so much of it. It's really focusing on what what practical things can be done to sort of stem the tide. So I just think that's really important to
with
know.
Japanese knotweed, it really requires a program. You know, you got to think about it and treat it like a project. It should be if you're going to cut it, dry it out. Don't just throw it somewhere, because any little piece is gonna grow some more. It will go through foundations, especially old, such as the Historic Society, and there is an infestation there. It has been cut by whoever's taking care of that, but it's coming right up again because it needs to be cut and treated. So, but it's one of the harder ones. Yeah.
Well, thank you for doing this, bringing it to the attention of people. I think Mike's idea is good too with the Medfield TV, and if you can publicize your the email address and site as well, so people know where they can go. And if the local papers, I know they picked up a little bit on, if they can continue maybe picking up some of that, especially a lot of people are away in the summer when they come back, maybe after Labor Day, to maybe hit them again with another PR push there, would be great.
Great. Okay. Just wanted to introduce and get your blessing, and
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you for doing that. Thanks,
Thank
Chris.
you guys very much for what you're doing. And maybe if you would like to do more, maybe it would be helpful to have something like this on the Japanese knotweed that could get put on the website, the town website, or get distributed through the different medias in town. And I mean, if you guys did it like a sheet like this on each invasive species per week or something, and then maybe we could help you publicize them in town through the town website and some other things. And
We're going to go before the Conservation Commission and see if there'll be an umbrella for our organization.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I would love to get this on the town site, if we can, because we can do that. We can do fact sheets on each of them and talk about what their level of difficulty and
Yeah.
what the aesthetic problems are for the town.
And if you have something like that Japanese knotweed that, as you say, is a project that requires a plan, then we need a plan.
Yep.
And so that, obviously, you could help us create the plan, so that'd
Be
be
happy
willing to do that, that'd be very useful.
But I think that's great, working through the Conservation Commission. That makes a lot of sense.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So much. Superintendent Ken Feeney to discuss roads and sidewalk construction. Ken, thank you for coming.
Okay, what do you want to discuss?
Well, I was hoping that you could give us like a roads 101 course as to, for me, I'm interested in how the financing works, because I have always had trouble understanding how we get Chapter 90 monies from the state. And so that if you could maybe run through that part of it, that would be very useful for me. I'm very curious as to how we maintain roads in town. We've been getting a lot of information from the Mass Municipal Association in the past year about having pavement management programs so that you know what the condition of all the streets in town is, and you know when things are going to need attention. And maybe if you could talk about when you repave versus when you stone seal versus when you grind out a section and just patch, and why you do the different ways and what the longevity of each of those is compared to the others. I mean, obviously, we do those sorts of things, whereas other towns like Dover just seems to repave everything all the time. So different towns obviously do it differently, and I'm assuming that we're saving money by doing stone sealing and the patching, and so I'm hoping we are.
Yeah, well, Dover also, I think they appropriated on an annual basis now, they appropriate just for overlay. I think it's like $400,000 a year, $300,000 a year. So that's the cost of a cold plain overlay, and he does it in subdivisions, so, I mean, that's great. We don't do it. Our cold plain overlays are on our primary connectors and our secondary roads. Stone seals will not work on those roads. The basics of everything is you can't lose a road, okay? If you get into full depth reconstruction on a road, if you let it deteriorate that far, it is just cost prohibitive. It would just be the only thing you would do. I know a number of years back, 20 years ago or so, Westwood ran into that problem where they had such deterioration. They actually brought in a professional group to evaluate their roads, and the roads that were already totally gone, they said just leave them totally gone and go to the ones you can save because it's cheaper, and then you'll have to come back and do full depth reconstruction. So it's the whole idea is to maintain, like crack fills. People see crack fill on the road. That's not very nice looking, but it will extend the life of a road for 5 years. So that's you should crack fill. You can't stone seal. You can't overlay over cracks because the cracks will be back in 1 year. So you have to fill the cracks. So it's again we use the stone seals in the subdivisions. I think I gave an example to the selectmen last meeting I was here, that we're doing Spring Street, North Meadows Road, total of 2 miles, $500,000. That's what we're doing, a 2-inch coplane and an overlay.
I'm sorry, which streets are those?
That is Spring Street from south to Maine, from Maine to west, 2 miles of road, $500,000.
Yeah, okay.
We've got 75 miles of road. So just put it in perspective. The budget is not, we don't have that much money in the budget. Plus you have to still continue to maintain the drainage system and everything. So the stone seals help us out in the subdivisions. They're good in the subdivisions for about 15 years. And so we've been dependent on them for a long time, a long time. A lot of people that move into Medfield, that are new to Medfield, say, well, what's this stuff you put on my street? It's the same stuff that was on there before. That, they just don't, after a while, it, blends in, and to the layperson, they wouldn't even notice whether it was hot top or stone seal. It's the first year. One of the things is that labor intensive on it is we have to sweep it. You have to sweep it the first year. You have to make sure you sweep it right after. Any breaks in the winter, we send the sweeper right out. If we have a February thaw or whatever, sweeper goes out to those stone seal subdivisions and sweep the streets, because it's going to be that first year is the important year to make sure that it comes out right for the people and isn't a nuisance to the people, the abutters. So, but back to Chapter 90. Chapter 90 is an allotment that we get. I believe it's registered based on registered motor vehicles. Population of the town, Mike, is the formula is
It's a combination of things. It's
miles of road.
Road, population, it's a whole series.
Yeah.
It's one of those formulas that nobody understands.
Yeah.
So
So
it's just a set amount that the state gives each city and town.
yeah, I think
each year.
Medfield gets about 300,000 a year. I think
So we
that's-
get 300,000?
I believe we get 300,000 a year for our road system. And when I first came here, I think that allotment was about 17,000. So it's just the cost of living, I guess,
Yep.
that's gone up.
It's borrowed money. And Massachusetts is borrowing money to beat the band. They borrow $200 to $300 million every time they do a Chapter 90 allotment. So that, not in addition to paying off the $200 to $300 million, they incur an interest charge with that. It's the type of thing that shouldn't be borrowed. It should be funded at a current cost. Of course, now you have this question on the ballot of not raising the gasoline tax. And I've read articles that said with people buying more fuel-efficient cars, with people driving less, the gasoline tax revenues are going down. And people say, well, why are you raising the gasoline tax? Well, for example, the federal trust fund, highway trust fund, has gone broke.
Right.
And it's same things are going to happen at the state level and the local level if we don't properly fund maintenance of roads. You end up with situations like Ken described. We hadn't raised the gasoline tax in, I think, was it like 15 or 18 years, something like that?
It was recently raised, wasn't it? And they tied it to inflation increases?
That's what they
recently?
did, but there's a ballot question on to rescind that.
Oh, to rescind that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
well, there's
it'll
this
get a lot of
disconnect
support.
there.
I mean, if you give anybody the opportunity to cut their taxes.
Sure, people don't want to pay taxes. They want the services, but they don't want to pay the taxes.
Yes, and in the long run, it'll cost more because when you go to retain the road, you'll have to do a full depth reconstruction, and you'll probably have to go out and borrow the money to do it. And you incur interest charges, so it's sort of a downward spiral. If you don't maintain your roads and bridges, it catches up with you and it costs you a lot more. So we've been lucky that we have maintained our roads over the years. You rarely see a pothole in Medfield. You know, if you do, within a day or two, it's filled. So we're very lucky that we have a good base of a road system to start out with, but we have to properly maintain it, and that takes money. So,
Are we
everybody-
spending enough money, Mike, on our roads?
I always remember when I started, Billy McCarthy was the superintendent of highways, and of course, it's a popular thing to cut, you know. Nobody wants to cut schools, nobody wants to cut libraries, nobody wants to cut park and rec, so what do you cut? You cut highway. And Billy put together a program one time, and he said his first program was that we were on a 400-year maintenance schedule, and then he said because of budget cuts, he changed it, revised it to an 800-year schedule, so.
I think I'm doing better than him. I think I'm around 100.
Well, I don't think either of us will care about the 100-year
Yeah.
period by the time.
We're going to make you guys stay for that 100-year schedule completion.
I think overall, and I think one of the problems that Ken didn't mention, but has accelerated the cost, is the laws now used to have oil-based asphalt products, and now they've been banned. So you have water-based products, and the water-based products don't last nearly as long. Now, maybe environmentally they're better, but cost-wise, it's another added cost because they don't hold up the way an oil-based product would. So.
They're doing better now with polymers and along those lines, but it's, you know, it's still, it is what it is. You know, you put it in subdivisions, and it'll get you through 15 years. Some of the other things you have to do, though, you have to make sure you maintain the crown of the road and make sure the drainage goes off to the side. Puddling on roads is not a good thing, because that's where the water gets into the cracks, and then even in the winter, the snow will melt, get into the cracks, then freeze at night, and you start shattering the road. So that crown of the road being established. I know you brought up that we grind. In the old days, they used to just do potholes. They come along with coal patch, throw it in the hole, walk away, and come back and do the same thing the next day because the stuff never stayed. We grind out any pothole we find. We make it square, you know, to the road. We put emulsion on the edges, and then we hot top. We don't, coal patch is a thing of the past.
Oh, okay.
Other than in an emergency, we do have some bags of stuff that's treated that actually is pretty sticky stuff, actually, if you threw it at the wall, if you could get it out of your hand. It's, you know, it's like bubble gum. It's a new product that's in bags, but, you know, it's a better coal patch, but it's not the solution. The solution is hot top and grinding, and that's what we do. We have a machine, a skid steer, that we put a grinder on, and I think it's probably a 24-inch grinder. And it's perfect for potholes, but you get that nice, clean cut, put the emulsion in there, and it's a much better patch.
And when you do one of those patches, what sort of longevity do you get in terms of years?
Oh, that's good. Those are good. They're good, and usually a lot of that prep work will be done in subdivisions before stone seals also, because you'll have alligator cracks in some of the roads. You have to get all the alligator cracks out, so you will just run that grinder right down, all the alligator cracks, and then asphalt it. The stone seals, as long as you've got a good base, the stone seals work. If you don't have a good base, stone seals aren't going to last. They won't last. So you got to have a good base for them.
So in terms of the, because I agree that the crack filling, I assume that has to be really important, because just, you know, if you get water in, it freezes and it lifts things. How often do you try to crack seal the streets in town then? Say the subdivision streets.
Well, we try and prep before the stone seals, so those are the priority streets. We usually bring them in for about a week, 5 days. They can put out a tank load a day. You pay them by the gallon. You got to keep an eye on them, you know, because it's by the gallon. They might put a little
Okay,
bit
so
too
you
much
have a
out.
contract for the.
We have a
crack-
private contract. We contract
As
out.
much as you can out of them every year.
Yep, as much as we can get out of them. Yep, that's that important. Yeah.
I think it might make sense to try to look at that in terms of not just a set amount, but whether we're actually covering enough streets on an annual basis. Because it might make more sense to spend more money on crack seal if we're going to get greater longevity out of the streets as a result.
Yeah, I think we're pretty good with the crack fill. I mean, I think we we keep an eye on the streets for crack filling. But again, the primary roads that when we're gonna stone seal, that they have to get crack filled. And, but yeah, we do. We go beyond that. 109's lasted us a while. We're into a crack fill stage now on 109, South Street. South Street's coming up, ready to be done again. South Street Extension, excuse me. And so, you know, and that's what we save our Chapter 90 money for. Again, the primary roads, secondary roads, because there just isn't enough Chapter 90 to do all the roads with
You're
asphalt.
saying you save the Chapter 90 state monies for the primary roads?
Primary roads,
Yeah, and then you do the other roads out of your own budget?
yep,
Yeah, okay.
yeah.
Now, let me ask you about one of my pet peeves, which is, it wasn't that long ago that the state, I think the state was the one that redid 109. And I know that when I cross from the townhouse to the library, my feet hit because it's so up and down, there's so many grooves, it's almost like a tripping hazard. The amount of grooves in 109, and it doesn't seem like it lasted very long.
Well, what it is, when you get into the center, you got parking on both sides, the trucks are all the cars and the trucks, they're all in the same lane, and they travel exactly in the same spot.
It's just the
It's
weight
just,
of those
but
cement
it's the
trucks.
cement trucks, it's 109 and 27, they're truck roads. You got 10-wheelers, you got trailer dumps, you got cement trucks, you got everything. And they travel right in the same lanes all the time, and that's during the heat of the summer. Those road temperatures are up, 130 degrees. That asphalt will move. Then you get the scrub boards at the stoplights, and it does move. But yeah, it'll be time pretty soon to look at the center again, and might have to grind it again and overlay it again and let it take its course. But I would say to get in that condition, I'm thinking 15 years, I think it started to show. I'm not too sure, maybe somewhere around there. But this is 18,000 cars a day out here. That's a lot of trucks.
And the 18,000, I think, it's just Truska trucks a minute that go through.
Well, yeah, I know, yeah.
Because of its location, we get an incredible amount. We got all the Truska truck traffic back and forth, back and forth. And those things are incredibly heavy. That's probably the bulk of your weight there.
I bet.
It's all part of commerce.
We
That's
need
why
a-
the Chapter 90 goes,
we
the
need a
state
stri-
recognizes these roads as important roads.
We need a strategic bridge failure on 109 and
Yeah.
between
We
Medfield
could either
and
raise the
Willis.
center or lower the road, whatever you want to do.
Depends on where you work.
Yeah.
Go west, you don't want a failure.
And I guess I see the other thing on your list here of things to talk about, Ken, is sidewalk construction.
Yeah, sidewalks, we do, when we get into the subdivisions, we try and cap the sidewalks so that they'll last as long as the road. We try and do those. We have a sidewalk machine. We've actually worn out the old one, so we've actually got a new one coming in, which you guys will be voting on tonight, with conditions of written acceptance by the state of the use of the money. And that we were told that is in the mail now, so that should arrive this week, both for the Route 27 project and the sidewalk machine. And so with the sidewalk machine, we do a lot more miles. I mean, we used to measure in 1,000 feet a year in sidewalks. Now we measure in miles. That's how much we can
Is
get
that what you
done.
use to, when you grind out those rectangles that you talked about, is that what you use to pave the hot top?
Yep, it can be used for that, especially for a long one, everything, anytime you can avoid wheelbarrows, you're in great shape, So that's basically what we do, yeah.
The other thing that Highway does, I think that's very helpful, is they sweep the streets continuously, which, I don't know if you're aware of this, but by federal law now, we are mandated to sweep the streets. I believe it's once or twice a year. That's a federal mandate under the Stormwater Management Act. I mean, this is how petty these guys are getting down to telling cities and towns what to do.
Yeah.
They can't run themselves in Washington, but they can tell us
Can we take that as
how to cross our Ts and dot our Is. So
can we take that as an unfunded mandate to the Inspector General in Massachusetts and
this is
ask them to-
federal law.
Oh, they can't,
And
uh,
frequently what the state does, The state is the enforcement agency for the federal government. When you challenge the state mandate, they say, oh, it's not a state mandate, it's a federal mandate. You don't have to pay.
Well, the street sweep in Medfield it's just continuous. It's any opportunity we have, it's out there. We also clean our catch basins on an annual basis. A lot of towns do not do that. We do. And it's good for the stormwater. Stormwater is an upcoming major pollutant now that they're addressing. It's I know when I first came here in the 70s, it was wastewater, and actually the wastewater treatment plant was built on 90% funds from the federal government. Now you don't get 10 cents from the federal government anymore for anything. They just mandate. But that's, for stormwater is the next big thing. We're working with the Neponset River Watershed right now on a grant. Medfield, thanks to the Bill Domey's efforts as a engineer for the town, we've got a lot of subdivisions that groundwater discharge, which he started in the late 70s, early 80s. So we're really ahead of the curve in Medfield as far as stormwater goes. We still do have some direct discharges into the Charles, because when they were put in, that was where the water was supposed to go, and that was the correct way of doing it. So now it's changed. They want these rain gardens, and they want to pull the pipes back. So we've got all our storm drainage mapped, all our connectivity, all our manholes are global positioned. They're on the GIS. So we are ahead of the curve, and Neponset wants to work with us on a grant for the town of Medfield.
So did you get all of this knowledge that Ed has about all these places in town and put that into the GIS so that when he retires, we can find these things?
That's the water department. That's Bobby Kennedy Sr., who's due to retire this year also, is the 60-year veteran, I think, of our department that knows where everything is on the highway department, so.
So you mentioned the street sweeper. Somebody had mentioned to me recently that street sweepers were the sort of thing that maybe towns could share. I mean, a lot of this stuff, a lot of your equipment is exceedingly expensive, and I guess my attitude is that I think that we should give you guys the best possible tools so you can be most.
Our street sweeper, we don't play well with others. Our street sweeper's out there quite a bit. The roads, we've grown as a town. I know Millis and Medway experimented with that, and I think it was kind of a dramatic failure. Who's going to get the
equipment.
sharing?
Yeah.
The needs for it. Right now, we always have a sander ready to go. If you have an oil spill on one of your highways here, our sand is out there, and our street sweeper will be right up following it up to clean up to get that stuff done, and then isolate it down at the highway garage. But so that it's. Yeah, that would be an old way. I mean, in the past, we purchased a roller with 3 other towns. We have a stump grinder because you don't use stump grinders very often.
Yeah.
I think there's got to be, 10 towns on that stump grinder. We purchase we don't purchase asphalt, we purchase salt together. We purchase fuel under the Norfolk County. So we do a lot of joint purchasing.
We share that machine that sifts out the rocks.
Oh, the screener, yeah. The screener, that is just the town of Westwood and Medfield.
Oh, okay.
And Medfield has it 99% of the time.
Perfect.
Yeah, well, they don't, it's kind of funny. Westwood's so developed that they really don't have a place to screen and store. They don't have a compost facility like we have.
We need to talk more towns into that type of sharing arrangement.
Yeah, it was actually a pretty good deal.
You pay for half and we'll keep
But,
it here.
but I mean, they did use it. They used it down their cemetery. They did some screening down there, but on a smaller scale. We use it we actually used it at the highway garage for the site work. We screened out and recovered an awful lot again. We recovered enough gravel. We're right now back up on gravel where we were when I came here 38 years ago, just on that site development at the highway garage.
And there's a danger, too, what Ken just said about Westwood. As we develop, everybody wants to save money by reusing materials as long as you don't put it in their neighborhood. So it gets to be a problem that every time they go to do a project, for example, they were putting materials when they were doing South Street in the Noon Hill, that little gravel pit off Noon Hill Road. They were getting complaints about that. Put it at the end of Ice House Road, you get complaints about that. every time you go to put material somewhere, nobody wants it. It's gotta go someplace, or you're gonna have to go out and buy, brand-new material, and it's gonna cost you an arm and a leg. So you have to have places to do these unpopular things that nobody wants. And, we are losing the ability to do that because nobody wants it in their neighborhood.
Yeah, well, we've got a lot of those places around town, although, because there's the one off of West Street by the railroad tracks. There's one in behind the Wheelock School by
Yep.
the railroad tracks again.
Yep, that's full back up now with gravel, yeah.
And, I mean, you guys store some stuff down by the highway garage I've seen.
Yeah, we have a little, small area at the garage that we also utilize, but we're lucky. That other towns do not have those facilities at all. We're
There's a lot
lucky.
of space at the transfer station, too, for things.
Transfer stations, compost area there. We actually intruded a little bit on the Army Corps land, so we had to pull the stuff back a little bit. So we've been working with the Army Corps. They're pretty good. They're good people to work with. So we're working on that.
Incidentally, I dug out the deed for the transfer station land, which was given to us by the federal government, but we have to write reports for 30 years, and that 30 years is up next year, 2015. So we will then have full title to that land, where right now,
We got it in 85 then?
85, yeah. So that's about when, I was probably about 87, the transfer station opened.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I just got a couple of questions. We got people that have been waiting. Do we have the schedule? I know you're going to stone seal a lot of the streets in town. Do we know schedule-wise when that's going to be taking place?
Yeah, we did give you guys, I thought we gave you guys a list of the streets.
Give you a list of the streets. We know when that's going to be happening?
We have not gone out to bid on that yet, but we're working with Allstate right now, who is going to be probably the only bidder. And so we still have to work a little bit on that. They'll be here. Well, you're in August already. We don't like doing it in September, so I'm shooting the month of August.
In the end of August?
Yeah.
And would that be Spring Street also?
Spring Street, that could be, yeah, that'll be in August. Spring Street and North Meadows Road, they should be. We did put a provision in our bid that they had to complete the highway garage, but if they mobilize for the highway garage, they will mobilize for spring
And Adams Street would be in that same picture as well? The end of August?
Adams Street is, the gas company, the gas company isn't there yet, are they? They were supposed to be there last week. They didn't show?
I don't
No
believe
show.
they've gone in yet.
Yeah, we'll have to give them a call.
And then just real quick on the sidewalks, we had talked to you before when you came in. Are you still looking at a planning phase for a sidewalk along East Main Street to go from Pound Street down towards the old Sunoco?
Yep.
Is that still in a
Yep.
planning phase?
Yeah, we're a little bit tied up right now. Our
Okay.
engineer's tied up with the garage. We're a little bit tied up right now, trying to get free. We have to go up to Mass Highway. I know, Richard, we told you we're going to go up there in September a year ago, and we still haven't made it there, so.
And then the other sidewalk that has come up by the police chief and also by the schools is on Metacomet Street, because you have such a great volume of traffic of kids that park by Metacomet, and also all the sports that walk out the driveway, down Metacomet over to the Metacomet field, and especially in the winter, with the high banks and stuff.
Yeah.
That came up as a real concern for both the police chief and,
In the morning, it's very congested with the
Yeah.
workers
Yeah.
and the traffic to the high school.
Yeah.
so
It's
I
probably-
don't know.
I think probably 3 seasons there, they can walk probably on the grass edge, but I don't think Metacomet has any drainage in it. That might be a problem. You may have to add a little bit of drainage. Huh? No, I know there's no layout, but I'm talking about drainage. I don't, when you put vertical berm in, you cause a problem if you don't have drainage. So when you put sidewalks in, you got to always look at drainage.
So if they want to pursue that, what's the avenue to get Metacomet looked at for a sidewalk? What's
Oh,
the-
I mean, we can look at it. I mean, we can certainly we can look at it and we can come up with a number for you and
And
just.
then this board would have
That
to
would be,
decide.
something like that would be a side job for the highway department. just to do, pick it out for a project for the year and do it. We also have Green Street coming up for the highway department, so you've got, here we go, there's a whole bunch. You're just gonna have to prioritize,
If there's no layout there, do you have to do land takings in order to put a sidewalk in?
Some sort of a layout. I mean, it can't be just, we may not have a 5-foot sidewalk down there. We may not be able to fit it in. But do you narrow the road a little? We don't know. It's not a busy street. I wouldn't think it's a busy street. Probably more, pedestrian.
And then the last thing is different walks I do around town. A lot of times, a lot of the sidewalks get overgrown with the brush, and it makes it very difficult.
Yep.
Do you have any kind of a program that we go down to trim some of that, or is that up to the individual homeowner? What's the policy on that?
Well, a lot of the brush is privately owned, but we do have the reserve that, we have a bylaw that we can trim anything over the public way. And so we do that. Eddie does that pretty actively. Sometimes, it could be poison ivy. So then you hire a looter to spray the poison ivy for us. At one time, everybody on the highway department had licenses to spray, but the state made it impossible for them to keep their licenses. It was just, where are you going to spray next year? We had to make a list of where you're going to spray next year, each individual. How can you do that? You don't know where you're going to spray next year. So we just gave up the licenses and privatized it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks very much, Ken.
Okay, thank you.
Ken does have a couple of bid awards here. One of them is for the Spring Street paving also, so I don't know if you want to take those before he leaves in case you had any questions.
Superintendent Feeney requests the selectmen to vote to award the bid to purchase Mini Mac asphalt paver in the amount of $36,000, subject to pending approval from Department of Transportation. Do we have a motion for that?
So moved.
Second, any further discussion? Any
That'll be
further-
Chapter 90 money that will
Okay.
fund that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Yep. Superintendent Feeney requests the board vote to award the Medfield DPW placement of bituminous concrete pavement contract to DR Paving, Melrose, Mass. In the amount of $683,000, $683,409.68, subject to pending approval of Department of Transportation.
That's the Spring Street?
Spring Street, North Meadows Road, and the highway garage parking lot.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
And that's Chapter 90 money. And there goes the $500,000 Ken just talked about, huh?
Ken, did you want to mention Causeway Street tomorrow morning?
Causeway Street will be closed tomorrow. Eddie's going to take a tree down
we got a big pine tree, dead pine tree down there.
between Jade Walk and Orchard.
What time is it gonna get closed down?
9 to 12.
9 to noon, Causeway Street.
On those houses down there, so all the residents should get a notice on that.
Oh, good, thank you very
Thank you.
much for doing that. Yep. So Causeway Street closed from 9 to noon tomorrow for tree cutting,
Just the end of it, so.
down by Jade Walk.
We figure most people will be at work by 9, so.
Yep. Or they can
Thank
work
you.
from home. Thanks very much. Vote to sign the warrant for,
You want,
oh, I'm sorry.
you want to do Gene? You gotta-
Yes. Thank you for waiting, guys. Gene Minio is here, appointment 45 minutes ago to discuss proposal to hire a consultant to conduct feasibility study for Lee Chapel. Announcement, installation of art boxes to begin Monday, August 12th. Hopefully.
Hopefully. Yeah, it looks like we're on track for that.
Great.
Should be Monday, the 11th, and Tuesday, the 12th. So congratulations on the signing of the legislature for the state hospital. We're really excited about that. To all the town leaders and volunteers, Bill, who's done so much work on that. I am here with Rob Gregg from Vine Lake Preservation Trust. Doug Hodge from Woodland Theater was here but had to leave for another meeting. Also representing Bill Pope from the Zula Gallery and Alexander Lent at the library in place of Deborah Kelsey, who's left Medfield now. And I'm here to request $6,000 for consultant fees to develop the preliminary feasibility study to assess the renovation of the Lee Chapel on the hospital property as a community cultural center. For those who might not be familiar with it, Lee Chapel is one of the most significant buildings at the hospital. It's one of the most recognizable, and it's in fair shape. It's about 15,600 square feet. It was used as a chapel, has been used as a gymnasium, and I think there were even movies shown up there at one time. And that's the building that the Wentworth students focused their study on last spring. So in January with the visioning sessions, they produced a shared concept plan that included renovating the chapel as a community center, function hall, and performance space. So the cultural partners would like to participate in that process. And if this request sounds familiar, it should, because in April, the selectmen approved $7,000 for matching funds for a grant to the Citizens Institute for Rural Development, which I, representing the Cultural Council, partnered on with Sarah Raposa from planning, also partnering with the Zulo Gallery, Woodland Theater, and the library. And that grant would have provided a 2.5-day intensive workshop in Medfield with experts brought into the community to study the chapel for this cultural community reuse. We were one of 48 applications that they had, and were notified in July that we were not successful with that grant applications. In part, it was because they felt we were too early in the process, and that they could be more helpful after we have a clearer idea, excuse me, of what we wanted, and that they felt that we may have access to the resources to get that started within the community to accomplish that goal. They only accept applications once a year. So the cultural partners have continued to meet, and we continue to see value in a strategy that includes the cultural groups in determining what a viable cultural center could be. We know the community's also already expressed interest in this via those visioning sessions. There still appears to be a likelihood that the chapel can be renovated, and the cultural groups would like to be part of determining the best way to use that space. For example, there are theaters around us like the New Rep Theater that has 340 seats in Watertown. The Loeb Theater has 540, and the Regis College has a theater with 640 seats, which we toured with Gil Rogers, Ralph Costello, and Sarah Raposa about a week ago. But Woodland Theater really should be driving the decisions about the size of a theater for this community and an associated black box space. So our goal, again, then, is to conduct a preliminary feasibility analysis that would include an initial assessment of the building and its property, preliminary concept, and budgets that would include renovation, but also ongoing operating costs. And all of this would be to provide a point of consideration for the redevelopment master plan committee while they're developing the overall plan for the hospital property. And so for that, we need to have some professional assistance. We do already have one consultant's proposal. We would seek 2 others, so we know that amount is reasonable to cover that cost. And there's no other grant opportunities within our time frame. The redevelopment committee timetable is to select a firm in November and have a master plan by May. Our timing would be to complete this preliminary study before Thanksgiving and then provide that to the redevelopment committee. What's important here is that the cultural partners would need time for assessment after the feasibility study to determine what's really economically viable for us. So one organization, for example, may take the lead, or we may need to establish a partnership that doesn't yet exist, or none of us may be able to expand or relocate. So any of those could be viable alternatives, but we'd need some help to figure that out, and that would all be valuable for the master plan to consider. So we acknowledge that a feasibility study does not commit anyone to moving forward, but Ralph Costello, a member of the redevelopment committee, suggested that this type of project would add value to the rest of the development. The question then becomes how to spread those costs out. So determining the costs would be a component of determining the best mix of the overall development. But before the cost comes the use, and the cultural groups need to determine what that use can be. So we're asking for your support for that study. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
You mentioned, oh, go ahead.
Just, I always have to ask the unpopular questions. Do we know where the money's coming from?
Well, that's $7,000 was from the hospital fund for the study. That was originally approved back in April. But as Sarah had explained it, we couldn't just reapply that to a different approach. So where that was for the grant, we couldn't apply it to the consultant, so that we needed to
We've already approved the 7,000 apparently.
Right.
You were matching the grant with that.
Right, right. Now we're looking to hire a consultant to do the same thing.
Okay, so this is out of the 350, the 150 we appropriate, or it's out of the appropriation
Right.
of the hospital?
Correct.
Thanks.
So has there been any discussion between your groups and the group that is doing the master planning that's only had one meeting?
Right.
Or the state hospital? One of the things that we did with the downtown was we kind of bifurcated everything into such small pieces that, in hindsight, I think we were looking at that, trying to figure out whether that makes sense or not. And that would be my only concern, is whether or not we're breaking pieces off that this other committee should be
Right.
looking at.
Well, we see this as part of their
Mhm.
planning, or would feed into their planning. The timing is the issue for us. And I did go to that meeting and presented the idea. I couldn't stay for the discussion, but their initial meeting was very preliminary. There was only 6 of the 9 committee members, and they still don't have they have an acting chair, but they haven't been able to organize themselves formally yet. So it seemed premature for them to be able to consider our request.
Okay.
I thought they set twice-a-month dates. I saw somewhere that they were scheduled for meetings.
Starting September, they've had
Is that the
meetings a month, but-
2 meetings a month? You don't know which day it is, right?
Oh, sorry,
Okay.
I'm gonna look it up on the
It's the
calendar.
second and fourth Tuesdays of the month.
That's my only concern. I think what you're doing is a great idea. My concern, I would like to see in September, to go before the Hospital Redevelopment Committee and get their blessings with that, so everybody's on the same page. I don't know if when is the deadline again for the grant?
This isn't for the grant. This is to hire a consultant.
So, okay, you're not
So
under
there
a
isn't a
deadline,
deadline
so,
for it.
so it wouldn't hold you back to wait to that, whenever that first meeting is in September, although I think the first one is with us, isn't it? Aren't they meeting with the Board of Selectmen, their first meeting, I believe? I just feel more comfortable coming as part of that committee. I think I agree with Pete on what we did with the downtown. I don't want to repeat that.
Does that screw up your timing to wait until September?
I'm not sure what the consultant's window will be at that point. I mean, if we're waiting till the end of September, we can try it. I mean, I hear what you're saying about trying to work with them.
We know that Ralph Costello doesn't care, and he's on that committee.
Right.
Pat's on that committee. Does he care?
Could you rephrase the question? I didn't go to the first meeting, by the way, so I've got no answer.
Frame of reference? Yeah, well, never mind then.
My understanding, the Wentworth kids were going to continue with another phase. I assume it's going to get a little more detailed. The first stage was sort of scoping out possibilities.
Yeah, they're very enthusiastic, and we haven't set a project yet. I mean, this could be something, but they are very enthusiastic and want to continue with that.
I just wonder with the faculty and that at Wentworth, whether it's possible to tie it in with some sort of consulting with Wentworth, where they've already done a lot of work on it. They've dug out the plans for the building and they've studied it.
I did ask them for plans. They don't have them, so I'm not sure where they.
Well, I thought I saw on the television program that somebody dug them out for them.
So did I. So I asked him, and he referred me to Gil, who referred me to the visioning website, which doesn't have the plan. So you sent me afterwards something different.
John O'Donnell that dug them out for you, wasn't it? Didn't he get them? Yeah, from DCAM. So, but I don't know. It's just a suggestion, just a thought that if they're going to be working on it anyway, it might make sense to.
It makes sense to get all the plans for the hospital, and I think that there's a movement afoot to make that happen. I know that John Thompson was working with John O'Donnell to move them to a different building where they would not get wet.
They did do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, DPW went up and moved them all.
Through the food services building.
So I think it's a great idea. and everything that I've heard so far, everybody seems to focus on the Lee Chapel as a community
Right.
building that we would want to keep almost regardless of its conditions. People seem to be saying, which surprised me, because that makes it way more expensive if it's in problematic shape. But, so I think it makes sense. I think it is sort of the iconic building up there.
Mhm.
And my only hesitation, as I say, is not wanting to step on the toes of this other committee. So can you, in your process, I'm not quite sure that I understand your process at the moment, but does it work for your cultural people to wait until September to talk to the Medfield State Hospital Planning Committee?
Yeah, we can try. Just the sooner the better that the cultural organizations can start having those conversations in terms of the analysis after the study. So it would feed into the overall plan, because if it's a $1 million project or a $10 million project, it might suggest development options to help support that. And so what the overall plan might be in terms of numbers of kinds of units and so forth might change based on the scope of this kind of project.
So you're going to develop data that's going to be very useful to the planning committee people.
Right,
Yep.
right, to feed into their process.
How long's your process going to take, do you think?
About 2 months.
So if you
And we-
started in September, you'd be done in October, November, maybe?
Yeah, we're hoping by Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes time to schedule people, so that's the tricky part. Then we'd want access, before the snow comes.
So I guess it sounds like that's workable. I mean, I know that makes it harder for you guys to
Yeah.
hold off for a month, yeah.
Yeah, if they need more time to deliberate, then it becomes problematic.
Yes. Yeah. And I don't honestly think that they will. I think they'll be very appreciative of the help. And
I agree. I just think I'd feel much more comfortable if it was under the redevelopment committee's guise.
Okay.
yeah, we've asked them to deal with this issue, so that I think it makes sense for us to ask you to go to them,
Okay,
basically, and then.
then we'll have to come back to you,
Our
because,
sense is from.
Oh, very
what I
much so,
heard
in
is that we're
support
both
of,
very much in favor
absolutely.
of it, so that, I mean, I don't think you need to come back to the selectmen if you, why don't we do that?
but
Why don't we
you're
just-
authorized to approve the funding, if I understand. They're not. That's why right?
Why don't can we do it this way, that I would suggest that the selectmen approve the funding, subject to the State Hospital Planning Committee approving the concept of proceeding with it. Does that make sense, Mike? Chris?
I just feel more comfortable rather than have everything go through them first, to be honest with you. I commend you for this, and I'm fully supportive, but I'd rather have everything come from the redevelopment committee rather than us having little addendums to something. I just don't feel comfortable with that. I would support that, but I want it coming from them, rather than vote something now and then come back. And I'd like to have them make the recommendation, then come to us, and then approve the funding and everything else. That's my own view on that.
Okay, we're
Okay.
divided 50-50 so that we can't.
See you in October.
All right, so that if you can go and talk to the planning committee then. I
Okay.
was just trying to save you another week or two from,
No, I appreciate that. It'll be important at that point.
but thank you very much for undertaking this.
Okay.
Thanks to the other cultural people, Rob. Appreciate it very much that you
Thank
guys are
you.
doing this.
Thank you.
What is you mentioned something about, when you were talking about the theater, you were talking about some sort of black box. I didn't know what that
Right.
meant.
Black Box Theater is a space that doesn't have secured seating, has flexible seating. It's a much smaller theater space, might be about the size of this room, and it's literally painted black inside.
Oh, okay.
So it's more for more experimental works, solo works, storytelling, that kind of thing. Could be musicians, small groups. It gives you more flexibility.
Boy, what exciting things are going to happen at the state hospital
Hope
once
so.
we get that.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Richard DeSaga, and you are watching Medfield.tv.
Access to our community.